The Minnesota Vikings have officially started their offseason. And the moves we're seeing right now, they aren't just about freeing up cap space or being cap compliant. It feels like something much bigger is at play. Now, I'm not going to call it a full on rebuild, but it possibly could be something called a reset, maybe a soft reset at that. Now, let's talk about these moves going forward. Now, the first dominoes to drop for the Vikings on this offseason was Aaron Jones and Jevon Hargrave. The Minnesota Vikings contacted their agents early on their potential release at the beginning of this offseason, basically the start of the league year. Now, with Aaron Jones, we kind of felt that was expected with his age, the running back position, and his injury history. So, in my opinion, that wasn't no surprise. But when you look at Jevon Hargrave, we were all excited about the Minnesota Vikings signing Jevon Hargrave last offseason. We thought he was going to come in here and be that interior pass rusher that this team desperately missed and needed, for the past couple of seasons. But as you all know, throughout the season, his role diminished. And pretty much he lost his job to younger players on his roster, like Jalen Redmond, and he became a part-time player. So I can see the Minnesota Vikings as of right now, wanting to move on from Hargrave and basically eat that cap hit. But one move that I didn't suspect with this whole situation, going to this offseason is the Vikings trying to shop and trade Jonathan Allen. Now, I get it. He's a big name. He's been, consistent, the beginning of his career. He kind of dealt with injuries for the past couple of seasons. I get it, right? You didn't want to eat that $17 million cap hit. But it seems like the Vikings weren't successful in trying to move him to another team. And they decided just to outright cut him. Now, we don't know if that's going to be a post-June cut where they separate the money. We don't know that yet. All the details, haven't come out yet. So we just got to, play it for what it is. But the next move I can see the Vikings making, or the move a player can make for himself, is Ryan Kelly either outright retiring or the Vikings releasing him. Now, when Ryan Kelly actually played this season, he was solid. I'm not going to say he was great. He was solid. But going forward, it's a huge concern because he suffered multiple concussions this season. And I'm not sure that in his best interest for him and his family, that he should even play football even more. So if you combine these three players, potentially being released, in my opinion, with me doing the cap numbers and playing with the little cap calculators, the Vikings will be $3 million under the salary cap. Now, before people get appalled and say that's not enough money to do anything, these are just the first moves to become cap compliant. So, but a move that the Vikings can make to get some kind of, cap space to sign some free agents this season to fill some needs and fill some holes on this roster. I talked about it earlier. I talked about it at the end of the season and early in the offseason. The Vikings should move Jonathan Gennard. Now reports have been circulating for the past couple of days that Jonathan Gennard is on the trading block, that him and the Minnesota Vikings are not seeing eye to eye on his current contract, that he basically wants to be played market value for what he is to this team as a top pass rusher. I get that, but I don't think the Vikings want to do that. And I feel like moving Jonathan Gennard opens up the lane for Dallas Turner to start and get consistent snaps. And I told you guys how I feel about the situation with Dallas Turner going forward. Now, what Andrew Van Ginkel does on the opposite side, I don't think Dallas Turner as of right now is capable. But when he spelled and he basically came in for Jonathan Gennard doing injury, he basically can play the same role. Now, the one thing with Jonathan Gennard and Dallas Turner, I see it like this: you don't want to wait until Dallas Turner is in his fourth, fifth year for him to become a consistent starter. You want to get as much value as you can while he's on his rookie contract. And I'm not saying Dallas Turner is going to go out there and he's going to be the next Daniil Hunter or he's going to be the next Miles Garrett. I'm not saying that. But at this point, it becomes, a luxury of riches at this point, right? Like you got Jonathan Kennard, you got Andrew Van Ginkel, and you got an excelling young pass rusher in Dallas Turner. I just think it's time to unload Dallas Turner and actually see what he got, going forward. Now, the Vikings are prioritizing youth and flexibility going forward, and have way more roster control. And I like that. But let's keep it moving though. Let's keep it moving. All right. So this is what I mean about a soft reset, right? Like, I know the fans out there can feel uncertain right now because you got veteran players leaving this team outright being cut. But I just feel like it finally changes how the Vikings build their team long term, right? And it's like I said earlier, this is not a full rebuild, it's a strategic reset. And what I mean by that, right, is you're moving away from that win now mode to where you got to go out there and sign some free agents, you know, just to fill the need real quick. And, you got to make a couple of trades to bring this player in because the window is closing and you want to win now. By the Vikings releasing these type of players, these older players on this roster with these, inflated contracts, it puts them in a different perspective going forward. Now, I get you still have to replace, some of the production, but I just think that's something you got to deal with. And that's why I'm calling it a hard reset, right? Because it's going to create flexibility long term for this team. And the one thing that I was afraid of, going into this offseason, outside of the quarterback situation was, are the Vikings going to go out there and bring in more free agents just to fill this roster and not actually build this team through the draft? Now, with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah being fired and Rob Brzezinski becoming the interim head coach, we know Rob Brzezinski's background as a cap specialist, right? So getting cap compliant and basically structuring contracts to where the team can have flexibility going forward. He's great at that. He's been doing that for the past 28 years. But I just feel like this is needed. This is actually needed for this team to actually go through, you know, a different type of philosophy and somewhat of a reset for this roster because it's time that this team starts drafting a whole lot better and we start seeing more of the young players actually develop. You get what I'm saying? Like that's a big thing for me. Like if you want to be a perennial playoff team, you have to like hit in the draft. And I know a lot of people out there like, what are you talking about? You were a big Quasi supporter. I understood it. I understood some of the majority of draft picks that Quasi draft never panned out. I get that. But I'm saying as of right now, Quasi is no longer here. So going forward, if this team changes its philosophy to stop trying to sign free agents all the time just to fill the roster, and they're actually trying to go out there and hit on draft picks, man, this team can only get better. Like like it can only get better, and it might take some time, but this is something that's well needed, and I just feel like the Vikings they just got to go through it. So the one thing that happens, during the off season, for a lot of teams is like you start seeing your roster reality, right? And what I mean by that is like the moves on the defensive side of the ball where you're basically releasing, your starting defensive line, two defensive players, on the line that are basically getting released and Jevon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, right? And you have another hole, on the offensive side of the ball with Aaron Jones and Ryan Kelly. Like it shows that your roster is not perfect. And as of like right now, that's not a bad thing because you have time to actually fill these holes, fill these needs, and actually bring in talent to get better, right? But first off, let's talk about the defense, right? So the defensive line now is a tremendous need in the draft and free agency. Now there can be different moves that they can make to, open up some more money if they do some more restructures and things like that. But now the defensive line is it is a need on this roster. Now, I didn't have the Vikings drafting a defensive tackle early in the draft, but now I do. Like now I do. You know, we heard that the Vikings will be retaining Jalen Redmond, which is cool. And they are, trying to get a long-term deal done with him, which is great, but you're still going to need depth on the D line. So that is that. And you also have to look at the, off-ball linebacker situation because you got Eric Wilson. They're trying to sign him back, and he's already in his 30s. But what the Vikings can do, they can target a couple of players in the draft, and some of the names that come to mind for me are like Peter Woods, Caleb Banks, and Dominic Orange, you know, later in the draft. But outside of the D line and off ball linebacker, the secondary is also, a need. Like they only have two playable corners as of right now, and we don't know who's going to be playing safety next year. Like we just don't know. I'm not big on Jay Ward. I'm just not. I mean, I think Josh Metellus is great when he's playing that rover role, but in order for him to go back to that rover role, they got to get actual safeties on this team. And I don't want to see Harrison Smith back. I really don't. I love Harrison. In my opinion, he's a Hall of Famer. He's a Ring of Honor guy for the Minnesota Vikings. But for him to have that send off the last game of the season, I think it would be kind of a slap in the face for him to come back for one more season to try to win a championship when I don't feel this team is, close to winning the Super Bowl right now because there's a lot of needs on this roster. Now, when we go to the offensive side, with Aaron Jones' departure, I understand people are like, "Oh, it's just a running back," but we don't do that no more. Running backs are back. Like they are back. Look at how many running backs were drafted in last year's draft and how many of them actually came to the NFL and actually excelled and was they were high producers, right? So Aaron Jones is gone. The only running back you have on the roster right now is um is Jordan Mason, right? Jordan Mason is the only one you have on the roster. I don't know what they're going to do about the other running back, the undrafted free agent, but as of right now, you only have one. So this is what I see the Vikings doing. I see the Vikings going out and signing a cost effective veteran running back to a maybe 1 or 2 year deal, that's not gonna, cost that much, maybe for a few million, and then maybe draft not one, but maybe two running backs and then bring in a fullback in the draft. That's what I see them doing. And I love that. I love that because I'm seeing this team getting a whole lot younger. Now, another, hole on this team on the offense side of the ball will be receiver. We know that Jalen Naylor is probably going to go somewhere and get paid. We all understood that going into last season. Now, when Naylor leaves, I hope that Keenan McCardell can actually, develop Ty Felton into something. Because of right now, Ty Felton is basically only a special teams player. And for him being drafted in the third round, we need to see more from Ty Felton going forward. And even if we don't, the Vikings will still have to either draft a receiver or sign a veteran receiver in free agency. And that's just what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of holes on this team. That's why I have issue with people saying, like, they're one quarterback away, they're a coach away, or stuff like that. If you look at this roster has a lot of deficiencies. It really does. And I understand it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I know if they would have hit on the draft, 3 years ago, that they wouldn't be in a situation. But I got to take that with a grain of salt because I don't really trust coaches on this roster, certain coaches on this roster, to develop the talent. Now, when we talk about the offensive line, just like I stated earlier in the video about Ryan Kelly potentially retiring or being released, right? So I don't know what they're going to do with that. They don't have a lot of cap space, and the top centers, in free agency are going to command a lot of money. And I don't understand why they haven't tried to develop a center in the background for so many years. It just it's mind boggling sometimes. Like You got some people out there that want to put Blake Brandale in that position full time. I'm like, nah, his best attribute for this team is being, an offensive lineman that can basically play all positions. Like, let's not do that. But either they're going to have to draft somebody early, and develop them. And that's the thing. We talking about develop them. We haven't seen much development from this team in the past 4 seasons. And that's just sad. So I'm gonna just put a pin on this because I don't know how they're going to address the center position, but it's a need, especially if you got a young quarterback, you know, and and that's where the organization has to get, you know, some kind of accountability because we haven't seen much development. So let's get into that. Now, the organizational accountability. This is how like I want to phrase it, right? And just stress a little bit. Like the Vikings aren't just reshaping their roster; they're reshaping responsibility going forward, right? And what I mean by that is this: it's like for a while now, the coaching staff have relied upon, all right, if we need to fill a need, we don't necessarily have to develop. We can just release a young player and go out there and sign or trade for a veteran player to fill that need. Look at what happened with Adam Thielen, right? There was really no need for the Vikings to trade for Adam Thielen at that time. I understood, you know, like okay, the nostalgia factor with Adam Thielen, but we all saw that Adam Thielen was quote unquote cooked. But there were some outside situations going on during that time. You had Jalen Naylor who had some kind of a hand injury, and the training staff basically told him that he was going to, miss the first couple of games of the season. He goes, flies to LA and gets a second opinion, gets surgery, never misses a game. But they had already traded for Alan Thielen. And while take this back on, the organization accountability, like you traded for Alan Thielen and you gave up draft picks for that. And that's something you didn't really need. And I understood it. Possibility Jalen Naylor not playing. You're not gonna have Jordan Addison for the first three, but as a coach, you have to figure some things out. You get what I'm saying? Like you got to figure some things out. Either you can change the scheme going forward, and I just feel like now with the Vikings having these cap issues and basically being in a year where they're basically having a hard reset, where they're going to be eating a lot of cap hits for players that they cut. Now the coaches have to fucking coach. Now the coaches got to go out there in the draft and get players that they know fit their system and that they know can come in here and actually be a contributor. I'm not saying they got to go out there and hit on every pick in the draft, but they have to at least bring in at least 4 players within the first 100 picks to actually start contributing. And excuse me, that's what I'm saying about the organization's responsibility. Because now you got the Wilfs, who are the owners who basically shoved out pretty much one of the like they were one of the most like spending teams the last offseason, right? I think it was the Vikings or and the New England Patriots. They spent the most money, in the offseason. And you gotta think about that. Like the New England Patriots actually made it to the Super Bowl. We can talk about how they got there. It's not really the video for that. This ain't the New England Patriots podcast. But if you look at it from an owner point of view and from a business point of view, you spent a lot of money last offseason. You gave your coaching staff everything they needed to succeed, and everything like just fell to shit. Everything just sat there and it didn't work out. Right? We can talk about the quarterback situation later, but we have to like put that in perspective too, that they're not going to have this right now. Now also, I should have talked about this a little bit, earlier. Like the next dominoes to fall to, for this team to kind of free up some cap space is we're gonna start seeing a lot of restructures. And the restructure candidates that I see the Vikings targeting is Justin Jefferson, Brian O'Neill, TJ Hawkinson, and Christian Darrisaw. Now, these players represent a long-term core. Maybe not TJ, per se, but the rest of them actually do. So I can see the Vikings actually moving money around, creating void years or restructures, giving them more guaranteed money upfront. I can see them doing that because they can see these players being around long term, which is cool for me. Like, I don't, I necessarily don't have a problem with that. But, it is what it is. But so let's keep it moving. Now, I actually got a topic, you know, like right here. And this is one topic that I really like. I really want to dive into because I've been talking about this a lot, but I just never talked about it like on my platform in depth. So I just want you guys to follow me with this, right? With these moves, with this offseason, like the first wave with the cuts, and potentially we're gonna start seeing the restructures, right? It makes me feel like the Vikings are coming out of that win now mentality, right? And I was hinting on it earlier when I was talking about you got some fans and you got some people that follow the team that they're basically like, oh, the Vikings are a quarterback away, Vikings are a coach away. I don't necessarily see it like that. Or the Vikings, they in win now mode. To me, win now mode means you're a perennial Super Bowl team. And I ask people all the time, it's like, you know, we got to stop being in win now mode. We have to have time to actually reset this roster because when you're in win now mode, you do things like overspending free agency. You do things like, oh, we might have a need for a receiver because a guy suspended and another guy may be injured. Let's go trade for Adam Thielen, for a couple of games and bring him back to the team and see what happens. That's the kind of moves that you do when you're in win now mode. When you're a franchise that actually has a true vision going forward, you're not making moves like that. And I ask people over and over again, the Vikings aren't a perennial Super Bowl team. They like how you figure they got Justin Jefferson. It's like I understand the talent that they have on their roster. But if you look at the teams that are in win now mode, the teams that are always in the playoffs, in the respective title games, it's a few teams. You got the Chiefs, you got the Rams, you know, the 49ers, you got the Eagles who won a Super Bowl a year ago, you got the Buffalo Bills, you got the Baltimore Ravens. But if you look at what those teams are doing, they're making the playoffs every year. Now, this year, the Chiefs and the Ravens didn't make it, but that's just 1 year, right? Let's see what they do this year, right? But for the past few seasons, those teams have been making the playoffs every year. They've been fighting each other to win a Super Bowl. The Vikings have not done that. The Vikings have made the playoffs every other year for some time now. And under this regime, with Kevin O'Connell going to year 5 with only 2 playoff appearances, he has yet to win a playoff game. And that's why I'm asking you, the Vikings are not in win now mode. They are going to have a soft reset. And if these moves signal that, I'm cool with it. I'm so cool with it. Like it's cool. But another thing these moves also making me aware of is I don't see the Vikings overspending on a quarterback this year. Now you got people talking about the Vikings, potentially, wanting to bring back Daniel Jones. He gonna command like 35, 40 million. Kirk Cousins, he still hasn't got, cut yet officially. And we know how Kirk Cousins agents, you know, open up the books and basically do their contract. So if Kirk Cousins ain't coming here, for a team friendly deal, anything below 10 million, I don't see the Vikings doing that. So they are probably going to look at a Geno Smith or a Kyler Murray because those quarterbacks are going to be relatively cheap. But this is how I look at it. Yes, I gotta put a different nugget in the situation, right? This is how I look at it. Now, by doing that, the Vikings are basically putting themselves in a position to where we're not going to overspend on the quarterback. This is how we create a quarterback competition because we can't overspend on a bona fide starter. We might can bring in somebody that we think can start, but they're going to actually compete because y'all know how I see it. JJ McCarthy playing is the best thing for this team. And I know y'all out there are going to be like, JJ McCarthy had a bad season. This is how I see it. If the Vikings have a quarterback competition, JJ McCarthy plays, he wins the quarterback competition, cool, right? You're gonna find out way more with JJ McCarthy playing than you're gonna find out with anybody else. If he shows any sign of growth and he succeeds, now you might have your franchise QB going forward. Hopefully, right? If he plays and he gets injured again, the injury concerns are true. You got to move on because the kid can't stay healthy, right? If he goes out there and struggles, now you know he can't be the franchise quarterback of the future. And you go into the draft next year looking for one. Now we can talk about me trusting the Vikings organization and the coaching staff and drafting and developing a young quarterback. We can talk about that when we get there. But at least you have answers on what McCarthy is. If you bring in somebody like Kyler Murray, or any other quarterback that you feel is going to come in here and initially start over McCarthy, all you're doing is setting this organization back for the next couple of seasons. Because if you do have another pop-up season where you make the playoffs, what are you going to do when you get there? If you don't win the Super Bowl, then you got to go to the next year and it's going to be, do we pay Kyler Murray more money or do, we let JJ play? Is he ready now? I really don't know. And that's just why I'm saying, like, the best bet for the Vikings is just to play McCarthy and see what happens. Now, it's not about tanking. It's just about seeing what you have in on this roster. Now, I gotta get up out of here because I got some things, you know, I gotta I gotta do. But this is how I'm gonna end it. These moves right now may feel a little bit uncomfortable. I get it, but these moves are necessary. The Vikings need to look like a team that is choosing sustainability over shortcuts. Now, honestly, these could be the first steps to building a true contender going forward. I really hope so. Now, I don't know what y'all think out there, but if you lasted this long to this video, I really appreciate it. Let me know in the comments, what you guys think about the Minnesota Vikings move going forward. And can you dissect it and kind of figure out if this team is actually, having a vision now going forward? And, just let me know. Y'all know how I ended. Skol.